The boardroom of Cosmos Incorporated was not a normal boardroom. Normal boardrooms had rectangular tables, motivational posters, and the faint smell of stale coffee. This boardroom was shaped like the inside of a rocket. The walls curved inward at the top like the fuselage of some great spacecraft. The ceiling was a live projection of deep space, and real stars drifted slowly overhead while the 12 most senior executives of Cosmos Inc. sat around a gleaming obsidian table and tried very hard not to look up too often, because looking up made them dizzy, and being dizzy in front of Jeff Bezos was considered a career-limiting move. Jeff Bezos himself sat at the head of the table. He was 60 years old, powerfully built in the way that only men with personal trainers, private chefs, and limitless time can be. His head was shaved smooth, gleaming faintly under the ambient starlight of the ceiling. He wore a plain white t-shirt that read, in small letters across the chest, "I own this shirt, A&D, also this building," which was true on both counts. He was drinking coffee from a ceramic mug shaped like the planet Earth. The continents were painted in extraordinary detail. He drank from the Pacific Ocean. He set the mug down slowly, with the deliberateness of a man who understood that every action he took was watched, catalogued, and discussed in hushed tones. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bezos said, folding his hands on the table, "I had a dream last night." Kevin, a nervous man in his 40s, who had worked at Cosmos Inc. for 11 years and still flinched when Bezos said good morning, cleared his throat. "Was it about the shareholders again, sir?" he asked, because the last 3 times Bezos had begun a meeting with the announcement of a dream, it had been about the shareholders. "No, Kevin," said Bezos. "It was not about the shareholders." He stood up and pressed a small remote control. The projector hummed, and the drifting stars on the ceiling were replaced by a single, enormous image. The moon. Gray and luminous and ancient, it hung above their heads like a promise. "I dreamed," Bezos announced, with the measured gravity of a man unveiling a masterpiece, "that I bought the moon." "Sir," she said carefully, "you cannot actually buy the moon. There is the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, which was signed by 111 nations, and which explicitly prohibits any sovereign claim over celestial bodies. The moon is, legally speaking, the common heritage of all mankind." "Sandra," he said, "have I ever let a treaty stop me?" "No, sir," Sandra said quietly. "You have not." "That is correct," said Bezos. "Pull up slide 2. The image changed on a PowerPoint slide of clearly homemade origin, in a font that had not been considered tasteful since approximately 2003. The words "Operation Moon Bezos" were displayed in bold red letters above a clip art rocket and a hand-drawn heart around a cartoon moon. Tommy, the youngest executive at the table at 31, leaned sideways toward Sandra and whispered that he believed the clip art was from Microsoft Office 1997. Sandra whispered back that he should absolutely not mention this. Tommy nodded. He would not mention this. He had a mortgage. "The plan is simple," Bezos said, entirely unbothered by the aesthetic qualities of his slide. "Phase 1, we launch our rocket, which is ready. Phase 2, we establish a Cosmos Inc. outpost on the lunar surface. Phase 3, we rename the moon." "Rename the moon?" Tommy repeated before he could stop himself. "Yes," said Bezos, "we shall call it the Bezosphere." "Sir," Kevin said at last, "with the greatest respect, every nation on Earth will object to renaming the moon. There will be international incidents. There will be emergency UN sessions. There will be strongly worded letters from at least 40 governments." Bezos nodded slowly, as though this were a reasonable concern being raised about traffic, not geopolitical upheaval. "Yes," he agreed, "which is why we are doing it on a Tuesday. Nobody expects big moves on a Tuesday." "One day, Tommy," he said. Without looking down, When your grandchildren ask you where you were on the day the moon got its new name, you will tell them you were in this room. And they will think you were the luckiest person alive. Tommy wrote another word in his notebook. This one was therapy. Bezos's personal office was on the 47th floor of the Cosmos Inc. Tower, and it was the size of a small aircraft hangar. One entire wall was floor-to-ceiling aquarium filled with rare fish from 4 different oceans. Another wall was a literal waterfall, a thin sheet of water flowing silently down polished black stone from ceiling to floor. His personal assistant Carlos, 28 years old, perpetually immaculate, carrying an iPad the way knights once carried shields, followed Bezos into the office at exactly 3 steps behind, a distance he had calibrated over 2 years of employment and had never once allowed to lapse. "Good morning, sir," Carlos said, already scrolling. "You have the United Nations ambassador calling in 20 minutes. Lunch with the president of a small European nation whose name I am still practicing, and your chief rocket technician confirms the launch window is Thursday." "Move the UN call," Bezos said, without breaking stride toward the aquarium wall. "Move the president. Do not move the rocket." "Of course, sir." "Also, you received 17 letters this morning from various world governments requesting that you cease what they are collectively describing as reckless acts of billionaire astronomy." The landing was bumpy, exactly as Dr. Anand had warned, with diagrams. Bezos sat in the silent cockpit afterward. Dust settled slowly in the absent wind because there was no wind, because there was no air, because he was on the moon. He climbed down the ladder and stood without moving, without speaking, without doing anything except existing on the moon, which seemed like enough. He set a Bluetooth speaker on the surface, engineered to transmit through helmet vibration, pressed play, and let orchestral music fill his helmet. He thought his grandfather would not have said anything about this moment. He would have just nodded. He unfolded Carlos's speech, read the first paragraph, looked at the earth, small and blue and impossibly warm against the black, and put the paper back in his pocket. "I came here to win a competition," he said, without notes. "To put my name on something big enough that nobody could ignore it. But I find I do not want to put my name on the moon. The moon is already named." He planted a flag, not a company flag, not a bee, but a photograph of the whole earth printed on fabric. "Carlos, pull back the renaming plan. Open international research base. All nations welcome. Get the UN on the phone." "That was rather decent of you, sir. I'm still filing for the mineral rights. I'm not a saint. I'm a man on the moon who had a moment." Oh. 3 months later, Dr. Anand ran the base with 12 colleagues from 7 countries, a full suite of scientific equipment, and a coffee machine she had refused to negotiate away. Bezos had agreed to it immediately. She revised her negotiating strategy for everything that followed. He visited on Thursdays by rover. He'd stopped complaining about the legroom. There was something about being on the moon that made complaints about legroom feel unserious. A graduate student handed him coffee the way she handed everyone coffee, without ceremony, as one person handing something warm to another. He found Dr. Anand in the main lab, where she and 2 colleagues were crowded around a microscope with the focused intensity of people who have found something that does not fit their existing categories. She looked up when he entered. She was smiling in the private way of someone still in the process of deciding whether to believe what they are seeing. "We found something in the regolith samples," she said. "Water ice deposits, much more extensive than the models predicted. And something else." She chose her next words with the care that scientists use when they are about to say something that might matter for a very long time. "Organic compounds. Complex ones. We do not know yet what they mean. We need more work. A lot more work. But they are there, and they should not be there. And that is," she looked at him steadily, interesting. He stood still. He looked at the microscope. He looked at her. He thought about stars over Texas. Write it up, he said. Share it with everyone. Open access. Every university, every research institution, every scientist on the planet. No paywalls, no exclusivity. Everything you find here goes to everyone. She looked at him with the expression she had used before for data that did not fit her models. That is not your usual approach to intellectual property, sir. No, he agreed. It is not. He picked up a small vial of lunar dust from her workbench and held it up to the light, watching the gray powder catch and scatter it. I came to the moon to win. I won. And now I'm here, and there might be organic compounds in the dirt, and I find that I'm much more interested in what they are than in who gets the credit for finding them. He set the vial down gently. Send it all out. Let the whole world see. She nodded once. She turned back to her microscope. He walked to the nearest porthole and looked at the Earth. He looked at it for a long time, as he did every day now, because it was the kind of thing you could look at every day and find it new each time. Behind him, the coffee machine hummed. People talked softly in 3 languages. Data moved from instruments to computers to the world. In his module, in a tank bolted securely to a shelf at eye level with a view of the porthole, Gerald circled. Calm and golden and eternal, without anxiety, without agenda, simply present in the ongoing fact of being alive, which Gerald had always understood was the main thing and possibly the only thing. Jeff Bezoz pressed his hand to the porthole glass. The Earth turned. The stars did not move, because stars are very far away and do not hurry, and they have been patient for a length of time that no human being can hold in their head without it sliding away.